And so I want everyone to recognize that you have genius and that you probably don't even realize it.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade thinking beer brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klinck proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klinck.
Hey there, welcome to episode 100 of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klinck, and I'm excited for today's episode for obvious reasons, right? I mean, it's episode 100. That's pretty cool. Now, if you've been listening the last couple of weeks, you know that I'm actually gonna do my big kind of whatever you want to call the milestone episode is a combination of this week and next week. And what I'm going to do over the next 2 weeks is go through the 6 kind of biggest lessons I've learned in the time I've been doing this podcast. It's not related to the podcast, but it's kind of the 6 biggest lessons that I want to impart to people that I think are the most important things for business building. And today I'm going to give you, I guess, lessons 2 through 6. So not in any particular order there. But next week's episode is going to be all about the single most important lesson I've learned and kind of implications from that. And then I've got some fun announcements. I've got some fun things coming as part of that are related to that big lesson. So that'll come out next week. If you want to make sure that you get some goodies, I'm going to have some fun stuff associated with that as part of my rebrand to bobbyklinck.com. So if you want to make sure that you get that and get all the goodies and all the opportunities, you can join. I've got a wait list right now. You can just go to bobbyklinck.com. Again, bobbyklinck.com, and Klinck is Klinck. So it's BOBBYKLINCK.com. Right now, it's just a page saying coming soon. But if you head over there, you can join the wait list. That'll make sure you get access to kind of all the goodies I'm going to have for people as part of my rebrand and some fun things that I'm doing as part of the process. So with that, I want to kind of dive in. But before I start talking about the lessons, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. Most people who've listened here know a bit of my journey. If you're listening here, unless this is your first episode, you've probably heard a thing or two about kind of, how I was a struggling, now I say a one-trepreneur 2 years ago. And in 2017, I had decided that I wanted to kind of build an online business and stop doing the legal practice, at least the way I was doing it. And I had jumped in my typical fashion with kind of, both feet head first, but both feet, whatever you want to say. And in the early spring of 2017, I had started appearing on podcasts. I had started, being a guest. I had a booking agency that was booking me on shows. Last week, I talked about how, I kind of was doing that wrong. They were sending out the exact same pitch in a template to all these podcasts. And I got on a bunch of podcasts that now looking back, there was no reason for me to be on them. But at the time, it was more about me kind of finding my voice, finding my message, doing that. But an interesting thing happened. Some of my friends, not people who would buy from me, but I have friends from when I was in college who are, one of them is a voiceover artist. A lot of them are musicians and things like that. And some of those people were commenting saying that they could see me having my own show because they liked my, the way I made things simple and kind of I seemed to have a good presence on those shows, et cetera. And so that was where the idea for this podcast came about. And I reached out to a company in typical me fashion. First, I took a course. I had gotten free resources. Then I took a course about how to create a podcast. And then I said, you know what, but I'm going to pay someone to help me, and went all in. I don't remember how much I paid, but it was over $5,000 to work with a group to help me. They created the art. They helped me create the idea. They helped me create the intro, the outro, all of those different pieces for the show. And they also, did my editing and did all of that stuff for me right up front. And so I went all in. And the funny thing is, when I did that, I was still a entrepreneur. I had not made a single dollar online. I didn't make a single dollar online until many months after the first episode of this show came out. And I had started paying these people months in advance. Again, this is typical Bobby fashion of fire, ready, aim. And I don't recommend it to people. For most people starting a podcast, I would say do it yourself to start with, etc. But the other funny thing is that candidly, some of the coaching that I got from them on the show and how I should structure it and how I should think about it are now things that I think are dead wrong. And it relates to what I'm going to talk about as kind of the first big lesson I've had. But I wanted to share that history with you so that you have a sense that when I started the Online Genius podcast and the first episodes came out, I'm pretty sure it was December 5th of 2017. At that point, I didn't have a business. I had a dream. I had tried to launch a course. It had failed. I had made no sales. I had been spending a lot of money, but didn't know what to do. And I was just in this, bit of a tailspin. But I persevered and I avoided what is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of entrepreneurs make. And this is not even a lesson I'm going to talk about here, but there are a lot of podcasts out there with like 6 episodes. There are a lot of blogs out there with like 4 or 5 blog posts. There are a lot of YouTube channels with 10 videos on it. There are a lot of people who do 4 or 5 Facebook Lives and don't take off, and so they quit. And the people who ultimately succeed are the people who don't do that. They're the people who keep going. And they keep going in the face of adversity, because I'll tell you, like my early episodes, I mean, I think in an average month, I was getting short of 200 downloads a month when I first had this podcast going. And if you think about it, doing 4 to 5 episodes, that means I was getting like 40 or 50 people to download each week. And, that's not reaching a bunch of people, but I knew it was something that would build over time. And so I persevered. Now I'm here to episode 100. And I want to share with you, like I said on this episode, I'm going to share with you kind of lessons 2 through 6 of the 6 most important lessons I've learned kind of in this 2-year time frame, in this period of going from a wantrepreneur with no business, no clue, to where I am now with a thriving business and, on pace. Like next year, I expect I will have a 7-figure year. And so I want to share the lessons that I've learned over that time period with you. So without further ado, the first lesson, and this is the one that I said, the advice I got when I first started the podcast was dead wrong. The first lesson is that we are all personal brands. You heard me right. We are all personal brands. And obviously, since you've heard me talking about the fact that I'm rebranding from Your Online Genius to BobbyKlinck.com, you kind of get this, right? I mean, I'm being open about it. I'm being absolutely upfront. But even if your brand name is not your personal name, you are a personal brand if you're in the online space, okay? People do business with people. The reason why people choose me over a quote competitor, and I actually do not view people as competitors, but people who are offering the same thing as me, is because they relate to me. They relate with me. They know, like, and trust me, and they want to do business with me. It's not that they want to do business with Your Online Genius. It's not that they want to do business with this guy who's a Harvard Law grad. It's that they want to do business with me. And this is something where when I first launched this podcast, I had this view of who am I to say things, and I'm not going to be the face of it. Again, when I first started the podcast, it was literally just the Online Genius podcast. It didn't even say with Bobby Klinck. There was nothing in the graphics that showed me. I was an afterthought. And the whole concept of the show was that I was going to interview successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in different things and get, expert advice from them. And then I was going to have this little quick legal tip at the end. But that was it. And there was none of kind of Bobby personality. And I was never going to do solo episodes. That was never even a thought process for me. And the idea was that I thought, especially with the legal stuff, nobody cares about me. They want to know that I have the legal stuff that will help them and credentials and things like that. That's all they're going to care about. And so starting out, I thought I was not a personal brand. My journey has shown me that was just dead wrong. People want to hear from me. People want to get to know me. even if they don't necessarily relate to me, even if they're not a former punk rocker turned Harvard law grad turned online entrepreneur, which is kind of how I describe myself these days, they want to actually know those things about me. They want to hear things about my life, about what I'm doing, about the decisions I'm making personally, and all of those things. And those are the tidbits. That is the things that I share that has the most impact. And that became clear to me it took me a while. So for more than half of 2018, I wasn't doing that. I was doing these podcast episodes, and some of them, yes, were solo, but even when I did a solo episode, when I would send my email, I didn't share anything about Bobby. I just shared about, well, in this week's episode, we cover blah, 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 blah. And that's important because blah, 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 blah. And guess what? Nobody wanted to read that crap. I wouldn't want to read that crap. And it felt corporate. It felt stilted. It just felt not right. I made the shift last September-ish and started telling personal stories. And when I did, immediately, there was a shift and people felt it and people started to connect with me. I got emails back from people saying, for the first time, I feel like, you're not just a corporation and I want to do business. I want to buy from you. I want to work with you. I want to do those things. And so I got that response immediately. And I said, okay, I get it. And I tell that story because I want you to understand, if my business about the legal stuff, I am at the end of the day a personal brand, everything, every business, every online expert, every course creator, every membership site, every template seller is, at the end of the day, a personal brand. Now, I'm not saying that there won't be people who stumble upon you and just buy because of what you sell. That will happen. But at the end of the day, the strength of your brand will be tied to you connecting with people. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot, and I'm kind of, shifting this messaging. You've heard me talk about my fans framework of find, attract, nurture, and serve. And what I've discovered and what I've thought about is I'm thinking of kind of like themes to use for each one of those or to explain it. And the nurture phase is all about you. Up until the time that when you're finding your fans and then when you're bringing them into your world, it's not about you. You bring people into your world with content, whether it's a lead magnet or a podcast or something. You're providing content. But ultimately, you want to take them from someone who joins your list to someone who is a raving fan. And you don't do that with content. You do that with you. You do that by letting them get to know you on a personal level or feel like they know you on a personal level. That's what turns, people who are on your list into raving fans who can't say enough nice things about you. And so this lesson is one that I think everyone needs to embrace. And I see people ask these questions all the time in groups I'm in. Should I go with a brand name or my personal name, et cetera? And my advice now is pretty much always, unless there's a really good reason not to, I would tell most people, just go with your name. I wish I had gone with BobbyKlinck.com to start with, because my life would be a lot easier. I wouldn't have to be, I'm going through a big, huge process right now. You can imagine I've got to create redirect links for every single page. I've got to replicate stuff. I've got a ton of work, and I'm not doing it. I've got a team doing it for me, but there's a ton of work that's going to have to go into this because, I at first wanted to pretend I wasn't a personal brand. And so lesson number one, we are all personal brands and we need to accept that. The second lesson is that we all need voices in our head. In other words, we all need people who help us, who share things with us, who become kind of the voices in our head that help guide us. The reason why is, look, we all have our strengths, but we all have our weaknesses. And we're going to have things that we're not good at. And we need friends, peers, just people who will kind of help walk us through those things. And in a sense, become that voice in our head that when we're thinking about something, they say, no, don't do it. And I've talked about a couple of people who are the voices in my head. And there's a lot of people who I could say are the voices in my head. But there's two people that I talk about the most. And I talk about them because I think when people hear me say that you need to have voices in your head, a lot of times they're thinking about mentors. And mentors are great. I'm all for having mentors, but I want you to understand that the voices in your head could just as easily be your peers. It could be people you meet along the way who become your friends and your business besties. And I've got a couple of those. One of them is a woman named Melanie Diane Howe. She is this voice in my head that helped me get this personal brand idea. She was in a Facebook group with me last year in 2018, and now I'm in a bunch with her. And I can tell you that she was in this group, and it was before an event. I was going to go to Amy Porterfield's event. And shortly before it, in the group, I posted this video. I had created this video of how I was a different kind of lawyer, and I was going to use it on my law firm website. And so I posted it in the group to get feedback. And again, I created this video using a lot of stock video and just pains with stuff. And then at the very end, there was a picture of me. It was my headshot and kind of, saying some things and whatever. And Melanie put this comment. She says, well, this is pretty good, but, it needs something. It needs more cowbell. And then she posted this famous skit from Saturday Night Live where basically Christopher Walken is a music producer saying that this song needs more cowbell and is like getting Will Ferrell to hit a cowbell. And, it's this running joke. And then she said it in the next comment, and the cowbell is you. And her point was that I was trying to say I was a different kind of lawyer, but I wasn't even like adding myself. There was no video of me. I never talked in the thing. There was just this headshot of me in a sense. And again, it was, more, casual than a typical lawyer in the sense that I was just in like a blue dress button-down shirt, a darker blue, but, I was still in, kind of, fancy dressed up. And her point was, you need to be the face of your brand. And if it had not been for Melanie, I wouldn't have made this breakthrough that we're all personal brands. And so I'm just telling you, and she was someone that I met in this group, Facebook group. We were peers. We were going through this program together. And her wisdom was hugely important in changing the trajectory of my brand, the trajectory of my business, the trajectory of my life. And another one of the voices in my head is another person that I met in that same group, Jillian Bowen. You've heard her on the show before. She is a content guru. She helped me with content, and she's helpful for that for me. But she's also the voice in my head that says, keep it simple and keep coming back and look at the numbers, look at what the data is telling you. And she first did this for me, again, after that same event last year. Now, I had met her in the group a little bit, but she's from Australia. We'd interacted a little bit in the group. But the first day, it was actually the day before the event started, or maybe it was the day the event started. I don't remember. She happened to be in a big group of us that went to lunch. And I think she sat right next to me, as I recall. And we started chatting. And over the course of the event, we got to be friends, I would say. And it was this thing. And then I met with her, I guess the day after the event was gone. And then we started talking afterwards. And at the time, I had this membership site for the legal stuff that was lessons and templates. And I'd been putting a lot of time, a lot of money into trying to sell that. Meanwhile, I had templates that people could just go to my website and buy. And then on top of that, my new plan was, people don't want a membership. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sell a bunch of specific courses. Like I was going to create a course for course creators about the legal stuff, and a course for membership, and a course for VAs. And I was going to do very kind of niche down. And so I told her this, and she said, oh, okay, well, and she listened, and then she did a little bit of research. And then on our next call, she said, well, I think maybe you should just look at selling the templates. Have you looked at your numbers? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I think you're making it too complicated. I think people probably just want to buy the templates. And to my credit, at least, Jillian would say that I at least am willing to be coachable. I think she expected me, I would curse her a little bit, but she expected me to put up more resistance. Because after that call, we got off and I went into Kartra, went into the back end and looked at everything. And, this darn Jillian, she was dead right. When I looked at it, I was spending maybe 5% of my time and 5% of my money on, template stuff, and 95% of my time, 95% of my marketing money on trying to sell this membership. And when I looked at it, 65% of my revenue was coming from templates and only 35% was coming from the membership. And she was basically saying, low hanging fruit, just give people what they want. And So she's kind of, that was the first instance. But since then, I mean, again, that would have been in like September 2018. Since then, I've talked to her many times, and she'll always kind of bring me back and say, are you doing too much? Are you making this too complicated? Should you just go back and, keep with what's working? And so she is that second voice in my head. Now, again, I could talk about a lot more voices in my head that I've got from peers, from mentors, and then even from, people who, I've sold things to who've become friends and voices in my head. But the point of this is you need to cultivate relationships with people who can become the voices in your head. Because having those people that you can bounce ideas off of and that will tell you the truth, not what you want to hear, is hugely important. So that's the second big lesson, is that we all need voices in our head. Now, the third lesson is something that I want to tell people that it's related to that second. It's that we are all geniuses. Now, if you don't know this, my brand, Your Online Genius, was never meant to say that I'm the genius. It came from this course that I tried to launch that flopped, my first attempt, which was called Safeguard Your Online Genius. So it was all about how online entrepreneurs like you could safeguard your online genius. That's the genesis for the name. Now, a lot of people think that when I say Your Online Genius, I was saying that I'm the genius. And my point is we're all geniuses. We all have genius and we don't even realize it. And this is a point that I think is important for everyone to get, because there are things that are second nature to you. There are things that are obvious to you, but that for everybody else, it seems brilliant. It seems like crazy, like profound, and you don't realize that because there are things that come naturally to you. I mean, people look at me and can't believe how much stuff I get done. That I just get stuff done, that I'm able to just throw stuff up against the wall and see what sticks. And so, if I could find a way to bottle that, people say I could be a millionaire. I was like, I got to figure that one out. I haven't yet, but that's one example. But when I created my Fans First membership, I created, at the time, I'm revamping it now, or it's revamped, in the process of a revamp now with this rebranding and everything else I'm doing. And I'm packaging all the training into core content rather than doing it on a monthly basis. But early on, I was doing these monthly trainings, and one of them was just about a list building. It was I think a 45-minute training about list building, and it had a section about how to create a good opt-in page. And the stuff I was talking about was stuff that to me was second nature. Now, it was just obvious stuff. And one of the members, she said that she was like, before she watched the training, she was like 24% opt-in rate. So about 1/4 of the people who landed on her page were actually opting in. She goes through the training, tweaks it based upon the guidance I had given in this short little lesson, and immediately jumps to almost 50%. So she basically doubled her conversion rate overnight with lessons that to me seemed obvious and simple. But the point is that there are all of those things that for us are obvious and simple that for other people aren't. Again, for Melanie, it was obvious to say, Bobby, you need to be the face of your brand. That was not obvious to me. And so I want everyone to recognize that you have genius and that you probably don't even realize it. A lot of times we don't recognize the things that we are just naturally good at, that is actually something that most people aren't. And that if we can help people with those things, that can be hugely beneficial. That can be how you can build an entire business around those things that seem obvious to you. And so I share this because I think a lot of people feel like they've got to feel like something is profound before they share it. They have to feel like they have some profound insight that's different than other people before, it's worth putting something out there. And you don't. And like another thing I want to stress about this is like, I've had people respond to me after I do a podcast episode where they'll say to me that they had heard this lesson from multiple people, including people who are like, who dwarf me in size. Like literally there was someone who responded to me like, I'd heard this lesson taught by Marie Forleo. I'd heard it taught by Amy Porterfield. And the person said the same thing, but she said, when you said it, it finally resonated and it finally clicked for me. And again, I looked at it and said, really? I said something that good? I mean, because I honestly don't think I'm that profound. But the point is that it may just be that the way you break something down and the way you explain something that'll be the thing that makes it all make sense for someone else. And it could just be a simple thing that you've heard a million times and you get it, but the way you explain it is different. And this is because, we all think differently. We all approach things from a different perspective. And so I want to stress to you that we are all geniuses. And I mean that in the truest sense. You have genius inside of you. And so you should be sharing it. Don't wait. Don't feel like you're not ready. Don't feel like imposter syndrome. You've got it. Just start sharing it. And you'll be amazed at the feedback you'll get. And what I'll tell you is sometimes there are people on your list, in your community, et cetera, who never even tell you the impact that you've had on their lives. I mean, I've had that happen many times where like someone bought from me after they've been on my list for like 8 months. I'd never heard of them. I mean, there was this one woman who she bought the template library the first time I offered it in like October of 2018. She, I guess, had seen my emails about it, had talked to her husband about it. She said, I'm going to buy this, but then it gotten busy. And then on the last day, her husband said, hey, did you ever buy that legal thing? And she said, oh, and I think she cursed. But luckily, she got in like 30 minutes before I closed the door. Now, she had been on my list for like 7 months before then. I'd never heard from her. And she posted a nice thing in the group. And I said, hey, I want to get a testimonial. And I got her on to do a testimonial with me. And she made me cry. I mean, literally, she made me cry by saying these things about me that I was like, wow. I mean, I had a profound effect on her, like, on seeing things that I was willing to do and kind of providing an example for her. And I was like, I didn't even, literally, I didn't recognize her name. She wasn't someone who I'd ever heard from before. And so I want you to understand that there are probably those people in your community too. So put your stuff out there, put your information out there, put your genius out there because you are actually affecting people in profound ways. Now, the next lesson, so the fourth lesson I want to share with you is that we all need to find our people. This is one of those things that I cannot stress enough. Now, if you've been a listener for a while, you've heard me talk about this as part of, that business should be fun, that you need to kind of like the people you serve, your competitors, your peers, the thought leaders. You need to like all those people. You don't have to like all of them, but you generally should enjoy them. But I want to talk about it in a broad sense and relate my story here because I was never good at marketing when I was a traditional lawyer. And the reason why was candidly, I really didn't like hanging out with all of the different lawyers. It wasn't the kind of thing, it didn't light me up. I didn't get excited to go in and spend time with other lawyers schmoozing about the law or doing any of that stuff. That was just never something I enjoyed doing. So if I had gone into like a room, like a networking event or anything like that, I was always the one who was just sitting there in the corner, silent and, just basically not talking to anybody. That's the guy I was. I always thought I was an introvert. I always thought that, this was a problem that had to do with, not a problem, but it was like innate about me. And so I'd always said I'm an introvert. I had always said that. And candidly, I have problems. I don't want to say I have problems, but like I'm not incredibly outgoing, even in like friend groups normally. And, I could talk about that at some point. If we're having a beer, you and me, we can have a discussion about why that is. But when I started hanging out with other online entrepreneurs, I was the opposite. I'm the guy who's talking to everybody. I'm the guy who literally, I'm the last one to leave the bar. And it's not about drinking, it's about, I just don't want to stop spending time and connecting with other entrepreneurs. And it lights me up. It energizes me when I'm at like entrepreneur events now. I tend to have like some of my greatest ideas, not like while I'm actually at the event, but like after hours, because I am just lit up. And that's all because I found my people. And now I'm not saying that you are going to be an extrovert. Maybe you're not an extrovert. Maybe you are an introvert, and that's fine. But my point is that my whole life, I thought I was an introvert and I wasn't. I just wasn't with the right people. And now that I'm with the right people, I'm able to actually truly be me and truly shine. And people are seeing, the Bobby that I should have been showing my whole life. And that becomes important because, look, building a business, there's a lot of work involved. And if you don't like the people you're spending time with, if you don't like the people you serve, if you don't like your peers, if you don't like the potential mentors that you need to build relationships with because for whatever reason, they're not your kind of people, you're not going to succeed. I mean, you might have a middling business. You might, be able to make an okay living, but it's not going to be better than having a job because it's not going to be something that you are lit up to do. I mean, I've said this and I continue to say this. These days, I feel like I get up and go hang out and play with friends all day. That's what I honestly feel like I'm doing. Whether I'm serving my community, going, talking to peers, spending time at a mastermind group, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Pretty much everything, except when I'm doing, look, there's some drudgery involved, obviously, and some of the stuff I've got to do because I don't have a full team yet. But for the most part, I mean, I'm playing at work, and that's all because I found my people. It's also important because when you find your people, that's when you're going to find those people who can be the voices in your head. That's when you can find the people who will be your sounding board. That's when you can find the people that will actually support you and be your cheerleader instead of the people who say, I don't know what you're doing. You can kind of imagine, or maybe you can't imagine, but imagine what it was like to tell my parents that, I've got this Harvard law degree. Yeah, I mean, I could probably go get a job again at one of those big white shoe law firms, but instead I'm going to create an online internet business. You can kind of imagine they were like, you're going to do what now? It didn't make a lot of sense to them. But it makes sense to you. You get it. My friends, my peers in the industry, they understand me. They get me. And, I love having conversations with folks about these things. Now, maybe, for you, it's not online entrepreneurs. Maybe, you serve I know there are people in my community who are like who teach people needlepoint. And maybe it's just you love talking needlepoint. Awesome. Make sure you're spending time with your people. And, I just say to you, you don't have to be lit up like as much as I am about who you're around. Maybe I've just gotten lucky there. But I will tell you that you need to make sure that you found your people and that you're serving your people, and that'll make everything easier. Now, the fifth lesson I'm going to share today is one that it's some tough love. And I sigh here because I'm going to have to be tough love about it. But what I'm going to tell you is that no one can give you the answer for you. And what I mean by this, I kind of went through this journey and I see other entrepreneurs go through this journey too. Early on, we want the answer. We want someone to tell us, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to do it? Give me a game plan so I can just execute it. And when we do that, we often basically find our first mentor and want to literally just follow what that mentor says to the T. Now, maybe some people don't do that as much, but we just want to basically copy that mentor. And so if your first mentor happens to be someone who teaches you how to build courses, your natural inclination is, I'm going to create a course. Or if your first mentor is someone who teaches people how to create membership sites, you're going to be, I should create a membership site. And we kind of do that. And we try to copy what they do. And the difficulty with that is a couple of things. Number one, I don't believe any two businesses should ever be the same. I don't believe the same business model will ever work. And by the same, I mean an identical business model where you do all the same thing. There is no cookie cutter. At the end of the day, I can't teach you everything there is and give you the answer of what the best way for you to create your business is. I can teach you what's worked for me. I can teach you why it's worked for me. But the reality is that you're going to have to find the answer within yourself. And I want to talk about a couple of examples of this and a couple of things that will bring this home. Anybody who's listened to this podcast for, more than once knows that my first and most important mentor in the online space, even to this day, is Amy Porterfield. She is the person who my relationship with her of building that kind of connection was hugely important, but also, I've watched what she does. But what she teaches people to do is to create online courses. She has a course about building your list and then a course about creating online courses. Shout out to my friends here who are in DCA with me, where I'm an ambassador, where I help people. But here's the thing. People I bet you a lot of people would be curious, like, why does Amy not use me as like a case study? And the reason why is pretty simple. I don't have an online course. I have trainings that I offer people, but I don't sell an online course. And that's something that maybe would be like, people would be like, wait, what? How is it that Amy Porterfield is your most important mentor, but you don't even offer a course? Well, I've taken what she's given me and what she's taught me, and I apply it in different spaces. But a year ago, I was thinking, I need to create online courses because, again, she was my mentor. And so what can tend to happen to you is that you end up basically, if you kind of follow too closely one person, it's like for a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? For someone, if all of you, everyone you're around is talking courses, you're going to think courses are always the answer. And I'm not saying online courses aren't the answer. For most places, they're a great answer. For most contexts, they are a perfect answer. For me, they weren't. And the reason why is very simple. People don't want a course about the legal stuff. They just want the templates to solve the darn problem. And so in a sense, by trying to create a course or create a membership or do something like that, I was not giving my people what they wanted. And so, I took what Amy taught me and I apply the lessons that she teaches people on how to build courses in other contexts. I mean, I now have a membership site, Fans First, but I have a lot of training in that, and I do training, and I use her model for training people. And for launches, I've gotten a lot of good advice from her and learned from her, and I apply it in different ways. But I don't just do a cookie cutter. But another one of my mentors is James Wedmore. I'm in his mastermind group, and he has a very different approach to things. But at the same time, one of the things that he'll tell you is, I can't give you the answer. What he can do is, in a sense, kind of teach you some things, but coach you to find the answer yourself. And what I'll tell you is, my approach to doing business, working with him has been hugely helpful, and I've gotten a ton out of it, but I don't do business the way he does. His business is largely about launches and affiliate marketing and doing a lot of those things. You probably heard me say, I don't really do launches. And I don't do a ton of affiliate marketing. I was an affiliate for Amy Porterfield because I believe in her stuff. And I know that if you're creating a course, you should not do it any way other than, by learning from her. But I don't do a bunch of it. And I share all this to give you a sense that often what happens is entrepreneurs start out and they want to just follow one person. And then they start maybe taking lessons from someone else, and they find that the advice isn't identical. And I've seen these questions. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? This person taught me to do X, and this other person taught me to do Y. Ultimately, you have to figure out what is going to work for your business. You can't simply take what someone is teaching you and apply it and expect to succeed. You're going to have to build a business based on what you want, on your particular strengths and weaknesses, on, how you want to structure things, but also on what your audience wants. But let me give you another example. So there are people who are not extroverts, who for them, interacting with people is exhausting. And engaging with people like I do is exhausting. Well, for those people, they can't plan to build their business the same way I do. Because to me, my most important work is engaging with people. If you heard my episode last week, episode 99, I talked about fake engagement and why I don't like it, and why I honestly believe that taking time to engage with people is one of the most important things I do every day in my business. And so I share that with you so that you understand, but if you're someone who would just be exhausted by spending 30 minutes by engaging with people, whether it's online or otherwise, and then have to take a 4-hour recharge time. I'm not going to tell you to do that. You shouldn't do that because that's not a good use of your time. But if you're like me, maybe you should. So again, you're going to have to build a business that works for you. And you're going to have to build a business based on your own gut instincts. I can tell you that my success has happened in large part because I've ignored what some experts have told me, and I didn't take their advice. I mean, my whole business, my whole fans first model is built on me ignoring the constant advice to automate, to delegate, to do those things. And instead I said, no, I'm going to engage and I'm going to connect with people. And it's worked for me. Now, I think it's a good thing. And I think most people could employ that method, but ultimately you are going to have to make those decisions for yourself. Ultimately, you're going to have to get to the point that you can take in guidance from multiple people that's sometimes contradictory and then decide what's going to work best for you. And that's when you get there, that is going to be an important milestone in your business. It's something where we all tend to go through it. We have our first mentor and, maybe they call us a fanboy or a fangirl and everything is about what that person teaches. Well, that person taught me this person taught me this person taught me this. And then all of a sudden we find someone else, a second mentor, and we start talking to them and it's different. And we're like, well, what should I do? And it confuses us at first. But ultimately, the path to success is through that confusion to the point that you create your own lessons. You create your own business based upon, you find your own answers based upon the guidance, the teachings that you've gotten from the different people in your life and the different mentors. Again, this is kind of one of those ones that people don't want to hear, but there is no, you can't go take a course from anyone and get all the answers. Now, you can, take a course, if you're going to create a course, you should learn how to do that. If you're going to create a membership, you should go learn from a pro on how to do that. But ultimately, building your business, you're going to have to make those decisions. So that's the final lesson for today. Now, next week, I'm going to share what is hands down the biggest lesson I've learned as an entrepreneur. And it's in many ways the most important thing that I'm going to be harping on and talking about going forward, because it's something that I see a lot of people messing up. It's something that I think is important to kind of talk about and to really start sharing a lot more of. So I hope you'll be back for that next week. Again, next week, the 22nd, the new episode comes out. It's also when I do my rebrand. It's also when there's going to be some exciting stuff happening. So put it on your calendar. I hope you'll join me. Make sure to download the podcast next week, but also, my new page, BobbyKlinck.com, will go live on the 22nd, and there'll be some exciting stuff there. In the meantime, join the waitlist. Go to BobbyKlinck.com. If you go there right now, all that there is a kind of a coming soon page where you can sign up for a wait list. I'm going to send some interesting, some fun stuff to people on the wait list. So I just want to share that with you and hope that you'll join me there. But that's all for this week. I'll see you again next week for episode 101, where I'm going to share the biggest lesson I've learned in the last 2 years of building my business.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.